and welcome back. This video is about tower placement. And a special thanks to all my supporters. Thank you for helping me help others. So to start, I'm going to correct something I said in a previous video. And that was basically when you have an interface event here, you can right click and convert the event to a function. That's a general thing that works for events and functions in some areas. However, you cannot do it for interface events. So instead, I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call this do tower action. It's going to take the same tower action of type eTowerActions. Now, a lot of the blueprint code that I write, I prefer to do in functions. You do have the option of using the same event graph, but then sometimes you get some crazy unwieldy bits of code, and I like to have things separated. And also, anytime you're using a variable, a newly created variable, if you're doing it in the event graph, it's created as a variable. When you're doing it in a function, you have the option for a local variable, which keeps things cleaner. So currently we're in here because of clicking on a button on a tower. And that means we have two things we want to do in here. I'm going to pop in a sequence because I like to separate those two things. The first thing is that anytime we click on a button, we want that little bit of UI to go away. And the way that that is done in this project is we have Unselect. So for now, we can just call Unselect. If I go in here and I run this, I select when I click on a button, it removes the UI as intended. However, if I then click on it again to get the UI back, I click and nothing happens. The reason that is because in our player, the Unselect tower is being called. It's clearing out the selected tower. And when you click on that tower and it's already selected, nothing actually happens. So what that means is that in here, we want to tell the player to unselect the tower instead of unselecting the tower from here. It's a little roundabout, but to do that, it gives us a good example because we can also add it to our function library. So in our function library, I'm going to add a new function. I'm just going to call this getPlayer. The intent here is just to get player pawn. So when we do this, you can see it returns the pawn for the player controller at the specified player index. In a single player game, that's going to be 0. And you can see in a multiplayer game, it will work a little differently. But that's out of the scope. So with this is giving us our player, but we need to cast it to our BP player. So when we do that, we want to then add a return node. With a return node, I'm just going to add a Boolean. We'll call this isValid. And also, I'll just drag this on to make it a little quicker. And of course, I threw it in the inputs again instead of the outputs. So let's pop that down there and drag it up. So in the case where the player is found and it's able to cast to the BP player that we want, all good, isValid is correct. We'll just copy paste this down here, uncheck that. And now we can use that Boolean when we call the function to verify if we got the correct value. There should be no case where this doesn't actually return true, but it's good to check. So in here now we can just call our getPlayer. As you can see, it's in our function library. And when that is valid, we will use that to unselect instead. And when it's going through the player like that, we click on the tower, click on a button, it removes it, click on the tower again, we get the UI again. The second thing we want to do in this function is when we have this, we can call a switch on it, expand that. We'll start with build turret now, and then we'll refactor the code in a later video. But basically, when we click on build turret or the other builds, what we want to do is spawn actor. The spawn transform, we don't need to split as usual because we're just going to be spawning an actor in the same location that this one is. So we can just get our actor transform. And the class that we'll be creating, we can just go back into our towers folder, right-click tower base, create child blueprint class. We'll call this BP turret tower. We'll go in here, we make sure that the static mesh actually has a value, in which case it'll be our tower square build C that we imported previously. So with that created, now we can select that from this class list. And then because we're creating it in the same spot that the tower currently exists, we want to destroy our tower base actor. So this won't actually work as is. There's reasons for that I was going to get to, but the main reason is because over here, I forgot to connect this. All right, so when I run that, and we go in here, we click that button, nothing happens. However, you can see that there's now nothing. So it means that the destroy actor went through, but it didn't seem to create the actor because that actor would have also had the highlight working. So the reason that is, again, similarly with the tower manager and getting that set up, we went into our static mesh here. We ensured that there is no collision. The problem is while there's no collision on our static mesh, the highlight itself has collision. So if you try to spawn this when it still exists, the two highlight meshes are going to collide. That's going to prevent this from allowing it to spawn. So in this scenario, we have two ways we could fix that. We can basically just reverse the order. So if we destroy this current actor first, that doesn't happen immediately. It happens effectively into the current tick. And then this new one gets created. That will work, but it may not be the best way to do it. I think in this specific scenario, just forcing the spawn is a better option. So just going to put this back to how it was. And when we run that, you can see that it gets spawned, and you can see that the highlight still works there. If we click on it, it will give us the same menu that we had previously. If we did this, it would actually delete the current tower and recreate it anyways. But we can create any number of them right now because there's no logic on preventing that. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video and would like to see more, you know what to do. And if you would like to support this channel, watch these videos 2 weeks early, or just want to download the project files, you can do so through my Patreon linked below.